What's up, Buckeye fans? It's Patrick Murphy from Bucknuts and 24/7 Sports here with you as we talk Buckeyes. We're nearing the end of the season. Only 3 regular season games left for the Buckeyes, including UCLA this weekend. Night game at the Horseshoe, a rare mid-November night game. We'll get into that. We will get into some talk about injuries and offensive line and things like that here later. But we're also going to talk some recruiting, which we don't always do on the Bucknuts Happy Hour. But I thought this was a good time to catch up on what's going on with the 2026 class, maybe look ahead to the 2027 class, as we are not far from the beginning of the early signing period for 2026. Before we get into it, reminder, if you are watching this on YouTube, please make sure you hit that thumbs up button, click that bell to turn on notifications so you get all of our videos, podcasts, interviews, all of that stuff. If you are listening on your podcast platform of choice, please leave us a review, 5 stars, all that good stuff always helps us. We appreciate it. So let's get into some recruiting talk off the top here. And to do that, we bring in Garrick Hodge. Garrick, thank you for taking time out of your day. I know you did the BM5 on Thursday morning. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon. So you've just been a busy man on podcast world.
I've just been a busy man in general. It's that time of year. We're a couple of weeks away from National Signing Day, and busy is a very accurate word to describe my life right now.
Yes. I've seen it firsthand as we were driving outside of Indianapolis last weekend. Let's start for people that don't follow recruiting super closely. You mentioned it's been a busy time. Just give a brief recap of what the Buckeyes have done here in the last few weeks, as they've sort of been on a recruiting heater.
Yeah, I think they had something like 5 flips in 6 days, something crazy like that. 3 specifically in the last week. They landed Jay Timmons, cornerback that was originally committed to Florida State. He's the second cornerback in Ohio State's 2026 recruiting class, visited for the Penn State game, committed about a week or so after his visit. Really a nice get for Tim Walton and company because he's a Florida State legacy. He's the son of Lawrence Timmons, a Florida State grade, and obviously had a pretty successful NFL career. They also – it's not really a flip because he technically decommitted a few days before his announcement, but, tomato. Anyway – they landed the commitment of defensive tackle Emmanuel Ruffin, and I know Ohio State fans and recruiting fans in general always like it when you get a productive player in the trenches. That's always been the greatest source of angst, if you will, about need more bodies on the defensive trenches. Well, he's certainly going to fit that. He plays 5 technique for his high school, but he's probably going to shift inside at the collegiate level. He's about 285 to 300 right now, so really big body, capable of causing disruption down there. And personally, one of my favorites, just in terms of what you can do with him, is Legend Bay. Let's call him an athlete. That's the typical recruiting fun term for we don't know what position he's going to play yet. But the way I had it described to me was offensive weapon is how he's going to fit into Ohio State's offense. He's going to play running back. He's going to play slot receiver. He's going to be in contention to return kicks and return punts as a true freshman. The big stat with him is he's been clocked at a 10.2 100-meter dash. Granted, that was a little wind dated. He's probably closer to somewhere between 10.5 or 10.7, but still, that's moving. That's something you can't teach, natural speed like that. I don't want to compare him to Curtis Samuel, but he kind of gives me that Curtis Samuel vibe of just get him the ball and see what he can do with his speed.
Yeah, I was going to say if Urban Meyer were still the head coach, we'd be talking about that Percy Harvin role that I don't know if they ever fully replicated that, but Curtis Samuel probably was the closest here at Ohio State. When you look at this class in 2026, number 7 in the country, they've got 25 commits. I think that's probably a little lower than people would have thought. But what's kind of your assessment of this class, at least as it stands right now as we record this?
Well, lower in terms of where they're ranking on the recruiting class rankings. 25 commits in general is usually a little higher than what Ohio State likes to take. I think last year it was somewhere around 21, 22. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's not usually 25, and it's going to get bigger. I think the best way to describe it is there is a lot of what's the best way to describe what happened over the summer? Just I think confusion with fans and maybe even Ohio State in general about this new revenue sharing process and how much of your money can you distribute and what exactly can you give a player. And nonetheless, regardless of how they got there, it led to some commitments going elsewhere, or recruiting targets going elsewhere, I should say, that Ohio State developed a great relationship with, and ultimately it didn't just work out. But like everything, Ohio State adjusted. When NIL first came out, there was a lot of angst about how this is going to work in the Ohio State athletic department, but they built a great model based on the team's culture and prioritizing retention, and that's always going to be a priority at Ohio State. And based on the last 2 years and counting, it seems to have paid off pretty well. I think by the end of this, let's say, December signing period, they will be in contention for another top 5 class. Not saying that they're going to get there. It's really hard to say if they're going to make a top 5 class because you also have to take into account what recruits other teams are going to get or potentially lose. So that'll make the ratings fluctuate a little bit, if you will. But I mean, I'll give you an example. CJ Brona is a Florida commit in the top 76 recruits of the 247-2026 class rankings, coming to visit Ohio State this week, taking an official visit. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that they eventually flip him, which is certainly a possibility. It would move them to the number 5 overall class right now. So theoretically, they are one commitment away from sliding into that number 5 spot. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to stay there, or that they couldn't potentially move a little higher if they get the right guy to commit to them eventually, right? But the point being is that for all the turmoil and fan worry that things weren't going well in the summer and that Ohio State might not finish with your typical top 5 recruiting class, I mean, Ohio State has done great at evaluating guys in their senior year, and Ryan Day talked a little bit about that on Tuesday that you can attest to, that they got a lot more data on the guys, and they feel confident that what they're getting in specific players. And when you aren't assuming that Ohio State is in the Final Four again, once their transfer portal period comes and goes, they're not going to be able to replace those guys. So hence why the numbers it's going to be closer to 30 than it was initially 21, 22, because you got to have bodies, and plus the roster limits expanded. So, or at least the scholarship roster limits expanded. The overall limits did not, but I digress, as Dan would say. But yeah, I think when all is said and done, they're going to be a top 5 class in the 2026 cycle, or at least very close to it.
Yeah, and if you want to hear more about this weekend, Garrick was on with Dave Biddle and Mark Porter this morning on the BM5 talking about the visitors. So check that out if you haven't already listened to that. Okay, let's set the rankings aside. What is your assessment of this class? Where have the Buckeyes hit? Where could they still use maybe a guy or two? Just what do you, as someone who's done this for a long time now, think of this 2026 group?
Well, I'll give you a spoiler alert. They did really well at wide receiver.
Wow.
Are you shocked?
I am. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
First time.
Yeah. Well, they landed Chris Henry Jr., who is probably going to get his way back into 5-star contention. I know he's a composite 5-star, but with 247 Sports, he's a very high 4-star. I think with the next rankings update, he'll probably get back into 5-star contention, but I think they just cautiously rated him just outside of it because of the injury last year. But the guy will be in contention to play as a true freshman next year. Not saying that he will, and everyone will want to compare 5-star freshman to Jeremiah Smith, which is a very unfair thing to do to any wide receiver. But the guy will be in contention for reps. Not saying he'll get them, but he'll have a shot to prove that he's ready to play right on the field. And his teammate at Mater Dei, Caden Dixon-Wyatt, I think that's another guy that could fill that Carnell Tate role. And what I mean by that is would be a starting number 1 wide receiver for a lot of teams, but could really be a future number 2 or even number 3 at Ohio State, but shouldn't be underlooked at all. Dynamic playmaker. And I mean, those two guys, I think it was a couple weeks ago, had 200 plus receiving yards combined and 5 touchdowns, the pair of them, and beating their rival, which I don't know. It's always kind of repetitive to talk about Ohio State recruiting, and they recruit wide receivers as well as anyone. But yeah, I just leading off with those two, it's great. I think the offensive line has kind of gone under the radar, and what I mean by that is that Maxwell Riley and Sam Greer are two guys well within that top 150 range nationally, and Sam Greer is a true tackle prospect. Maxwell's more of a guy that could play feasibly on all spots across the starting five. But they're kind of, I don't want to say taken for granted because everyone knows that they're good, but they're just not out of state. So maybe everyone doesn't go, oh my gosh, Ohio State finally broke the curse. They finally got a high profile guy. Like if Sam Greer went anyone else, he'd be one of the crown jewels of a lot of teams' recruiting class on the offensive line. This is a guy that has potential to play on Sundays for a long time. And Patrick, you can point this out as well. How many starting members of the Ohio State offensive line are from Ohio as we speak right now?
Yeah, three of them, right?
Yeah, so recruiting offensive line in Ohio has proven to be a sufficient strategy. So I like where they're at there. Up until Jay Timmons committed, I thought the one weak point of it was there was only one cornerback committed in the 2026 class, but Tim Walton rectified that in a hurry. And if they get C.J. Browna, then you're looking at three cornerbacks that would be the apple of the eye to almost any. So that went from a weakness to potentially a strength pretty quickly here. Obviously, we'll have to see how things plan out with CJ on this visit. But overall, I think it's a pretty good class. And it's hard to completely say where it is like compared to others because it's not done yet. Normally,
Sure.
that's a weird thing to say because Ohio State normally has most of its recruiting wrapped up right about now, but I don't know if they will. I think there could be a couple more additions coming. I think they need a third cornerback. I think they need another defensive end. There could be a tight end, or I think that one might be contingent on if Max Claire's coming back or not, or what their read is on that situation. Well, and if a 2026 in-state tight end shows up at either this weekend's game or the next weekend's game, that could also give you a good indication of where they're leaning, because if they get a tight end, that would probably be somebody like that. And they'll probably still take a couple swings at big fishes until signing day, until pen hits paper and they officially get told no. So I think it'll be pretty fun to evaluate this. And then when signing day comes and goes, I'll delve into all of it and put it a little bit more on Bucknuts about where I like it the most, where I think they could have done better, et cetera, et cetera.
I take that back. There are 4 starting offensive linemen. I forgot that Philip Daniels, despite not.
I was about to say, I was like, I swear there's 4, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know he started and he's from Indiana, but I was like, hey, I'm not questioning the team expert over here. But
oh no. Yeah. I was thinking through the guys that had been there, and when I thought Philip Daniels, I was like, oh, Minnesota. Wait, no. He's an Ohio kid. He just had to go somewhere else before coming back. Garrick, you mentioned sort of the slow play that Ohio State's done, and Ryan Day talked about that this week. Do you think that's something that they will do more of in the future, or is that just a case of kind of how the summer went, like you were talking about off the top?
Great question. They might do it more because it seems to have worked right now. Let's be honest, they've also been the beneficiary of a very chaotic coaching carousel that has happened a lot in season. I don't think the sport has ever seen this many in-season firings, and where you still have ample time to get recruits that are committed elsewhere scheduled and on campus. Normally when the firings happen or they leave to take another job, it's the last week of the season or somewhere around there. And then it's a 1 week scamper and who knows, right? But they've been the beneficiary of that. They've also been the beneficiary of they look like the best team in college football, and it doesn't look like there's a close second, especially after that Indiana-Penn State game where, yes, it was great that Fernando Mendoza got to play hero and somehow was in the Heisman conversation because he threw a game-winning touchdown, but the quarterback for Ohio State somehow threw 300 yards by the end of the third quarter and had a very ho-hum day. But nonetheless, yeah, I think this is a good trial period, and the fact that it's working might make them more likely to do that, especially if they keep the transfer portal situation where it is. I think that this strategy might be here to stay. And honestly, I think they're really proud of their evaluations on the guys that they've done in this senior seasons. A guy like Braxton Rembert, linebacker that's committed to Lake Forest right now. He's getting a lot of looks elsewhere and could be a late riser. Kamari Bain, that committed, so he actually will be in Columbus. We'll have to see about whether Braxton is or not, but Kamari Bain had a great first 3 games of his senior season. They offered him, and they got the flip done from Maryland. I'm not entirely sure when the next 247 Sports rankings are going to come out, but he's going to be a really fast riser in those. And then this is a completely separate topic, but you also mentioned a top 5 class. That's another factor too. What are the players' final rankings going to be? Because you finished a top 5 class on National Signing Day, and then you finished a top 5 class once the final rankings are out. I think it's usually sometime in January or February. But I guess the more fun thing to look at is like on signing day, like where they actually finished. So I don't know. We're in for a next fun couple of weeks, and basically these are all great questions. But I'm ready to take a 30,000-foot view on December 4th, the day after National Signing Day. Right now, Ohio State's in contention for a lot of guys, so it's a really fun time to be a Bucknuts subscriber. Is the best way I can put it.
There you go. Nice sell right there. Good job. 2027, it may seem a ways off, but the recruiting cycle's already begun. Ohio State already has 5 commits in that class. What do you like about what the Buckeyes have done here early on, and how do you feel about just the approach to 2027 once they get 2026 fully wrapped up during the signing period, or maybe a little bit after if they have to?
Yeah, it's hard to fully get a grasp on 2027 because, like you said, they're focused primarily on finishing 2026. So once December 4th, that December 4th the day after. Once December 3rd comes and goes, then it'll be, as Bill Belichick would say, on to 2027. But they have a great start, I will say that. And they're even before December 3rd, I think there may be an addition or two that's coming Ohio State's way in that cycle. We'll just have to see there, right? But
all right.
So Jameer Brown is arguably the best or the second best wide receiver in the entire country in that class, and resides an hour up the road in Dayton, Ohio. True freak athlete, true track star, has all the speed you can imagine. And when I saw him at camp 2 years ago, I saw the vision. When I saw him at the Under Armour camp last spring and then watched him play on the field this fall, he's the real deal, man. Brian Hartline's done it again. We keep giving flowers to wide receiver recruits, but when they stop bringing in these all-stars, I'll stop giving them flowers. Brady Edmonds, it's really tough not to root for the kid based on how likable he is and how much he really wants to be a Buckeye. He lives in California, but you would think the guy's from Cleveland with how much he grew up rooting for Ohio State, and a lot of that stems from his grandfather's fandom of Ohio State. He'll also be another guy that's back at Ohio State this weekend for UCLA. The main reason for him being there, besides that he loves Ohio State, is that he is trying to peer recruit the hell out of Brock Williams, who is Keenan Bailey's #1 tight end target for the 2027 class. And that recruitment could be done sooner rather than later. He told me when I went to go see him play in October that he's eyeing a early December commitment, and he'll choose between Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas.
Okay.
Not a long way to go, but a lot of things can still happen is the best way I can phrase that. But as of right now, I like where Ohio State sits with that. But if they lock him in, that's like a top 50 recruit and the #2 tight end in the country. So Ohio State would be off and running there. And don't want to undersell these guys either. Angelo Smith, Jeremiah's little brother. I know he's going to be called Jeremiah's little brother for the rest of his life, unfortunately, because Jeremiah is 101. But Angelo's a really good football player, too. He came to a camp. I don't know. You were there, Murph. I don't know if you got a chance to watch him or not, or if you watched other guys. But he's a little guy right now. He's a little short, but he hits like a truck. His coverage skills are impeccable. I should also have said that he's a safety. That would give a good
he's not a receiver.
Yeah, he's not a wide receiver. But he's a dynamic playmaker. And some people said, well, they just took his commitment to appease Jeremiah. No, I don't think so. I mean, the guy's a playmaker. And you also have to remember Jeremiah wasn't that big until about end of his junior year, more or less, is when he had that really huge growth spurt. But Not saying that Angelo is going to have a Jeremiah growth spurt, but I will say you know the family, you know the work ethic, and hey, if he's anything close to his brother, you'll take two of those, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The two offensive linemen just committed about a week and a half ago, Mason Wilt and Kellen Weimer. What did we say about locking down Ohio and Ohio offensive linemen? Tyler Bowen's killing it on the recruiting trail so far. I would say he's a maybe not much, but he's a better recruiter than Justin Fry was at his time here, just in terms of how far he extends his board and his options and how well he connects with the kids. Now, whether he is as good of a developer on the field remains to be seen. So far, so good his first year, even though there are some questions at right guard, right? But the returns and what I'm hearing from kids and all that are talking to Tyler Bowen have been fantastic. So looks like a really smart and productive hire for Ryan Day so far in replacing Justin Fry.
You brought it up briefly earlier, but the transfer portal has at least leveled up to what recruiting is these days. Obviously, it's tough to say what the Buckeyes will try and do in the transfer portal, given they're still probably going to be playing and figuring out what guys are going to leave. Only one, as you mentioned, only one window. But how active do you think Ohio State will be? It does seem like each year they've gotten a little bit more and more invested in the transfer portal. What sort of things should Buckeye fans look for when that opens up this, not too long from now?
Well, it's kind of hard to say because you, number one, don't know who's going in the portal, and number two, you don't know how many guys are declaring for the NFL and how many aren't. And obviously, those two factors will tell you a lot about how active Ohio State's going to be in the portal at certain positions. But I did answer a similar question to this in my chat on Wednesday. And so I just went position by position, and I was like, quarterback, no, unless it's a depth piece. Running back, yeah, probably. Wide receiver, nah. I mean, I guess if Cam Coleman really wants to come to Ohio State on a crazy discount, like some suggested, then maybe, but I doubt it. Tight end, it probably depends on Max Clare. Offensive line also depends on some guys' decision, but if everyone comes back, I don't see a huge need for it, except maybe depth purposes. Defensive end, most certainly. I think that's their biggest pressing need. And again, the one thing then, I'm not trying to digress too far here, but that we haven't really taken into account now is, and a lot of college leaders are really worried about it, is what happens about a preliminary injunction hearing on December 15th about whether guys can get that. Because if you remember the NCAA, there was a proposal for, all right, just give players 5 years of eligibility and essentially eliminate red shirts. Like if you can play for 5 years, play for 5 years. And the NCAA ultimately tabled that proposal to indefinitely, let's just say. But there is an injunction going to be heard. And if that's the case, then I'll give you an example. Someone like Caden Curry could come back that you're not counting on coming back right now, because if the rules are the way that they are, I mean, yeah, he's just at eligibility. Them's the breaks. Good luck in the NFL. But a guy like him who's probably either a day 2 or a day 3 pick right now, maybe he wants to come back to Ohio State and play for Matt Patricia for another season. So that's another thing that could be on the radar, and that will probably be decided before the portal opens. So things could come in a huge wave here the next couple of months. But anyway, yeah, I made Dan proud. We digressed a lot. But assuming that doesn't happen, defensive end most certainly. Defensive tackle depends on what Caden McDonald does, but if he leaves, I assume that they would really like some proven production there to pair alongside Edric Houston, Will Smith, all those guys. Linebacker, I think you can probably be fine with the talent that they have coming in. Cornerback, I guess it depends on Jermaine Matthews, but I really like Devin Sanchez and Aaron Scott a lot. I think that Ohio State does too. And especially if you get these 3 cornerbacks and if CJ commits, you're really looking pretty for your cornerback room right now. Safety, I I mean, Blaine Bradford's coming in, and that guy's pretty darn good. Fahim Delane is also another highly rated guy from a cycle ago that could make an impact next year. And then, did I leave a position out? I don't think so. Oh yeah, special teams. I guess you could bring in some competition at kicker and punter. I wouldn't rule that out either.
Yeah, and one thing at safety is to keep in mind they're essentially working to redshirt Malik Hartford right now. So you assume that means he's going to be back, but you never know. All right, Garrick. Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy podcasting day and just busy day in general to jump on with us. I thought that was good insight for the people out there that are interested in what's going on as we approach the 2026 early signing day. So appreciate you hopping on.
Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks again to Garrick for coming on. He has been quite the addition to the Bucknuts staff this season. And as he mentioned, now is a great time if you are or have ever thought about becoming a Bucknuts VIP subscriber with the early signing period, which is the de facto national signing day, coming up in less than a month. Plenty of recruiting talk. Plus, we've got the Buckeyes finishing up this season, obviously the playoff upcoming. So a great time, really, if you are. Just go over to any of the 24/7 sports sites, but specifically Bucknuts, and you can sign up there if you are not already. So now I want to talk about some of the injuries, some offensive line play, maybe some trench stuff. We'll see if we have enough time to talk about some things on the defensive side of the ball. But mainly, we'll start with the injuries because those have started to pile up a little bit for the Buckeyes. And look, a little bit, I emphasize, because it hasn't been a major issue for Ohio State this season. That's me loudly knocking on wood there. I mean, there have been injuries. There have been guys that have missed a decent amount of time. But for the most part, in terms of key starters, key contributors, Ohio State has been healthy. But last week, we knew going into the game, we knew that there were some questionable guys. We knew that Josh Padilla, was going to be out. And while he's not a starter, he has been a key member of that offensive line in terms of adding depth. He's played quite a bit, and we'll get to him more in a second. But then Philip Daniels doesn't play at right tackle, and Carnell Tate, who was not on the availability report at all, does not play. Apparent tightness during warmups. It sounds like maybe an ankle was the issue there, and they didn't want to risk that. He was, as Ryan Day said, and he has said in the past about guys available. And then Tywone Malone also did not play. So what does that look like going forward? No word this week on Carnell Tate. Ryan Day was asked on Tuesday at the very end of his press conference, and he said no update. At the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Wednesday night when we went in for player interviews following practice, the wide receivers had already left the field. There were, I don't think, any of the wide receivers, but certainly not Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, any of the guys you'd expect to see out there. So tough to say on that one. Based on what we saw from Carnell walking around the sideline, I have to imagine it is a minor thing, but obviously you're a big favorite again this week against UCLA, and this may be a theme. Do you hold guys out once again just to be sure they're ready for a game in a couple weeks and the postseason run that could follow? Josh Padilla, he's one that I would be surprised if he plays against UCLA. Obviously, the Buckeyes didn't bring him even to West Lafayette for the Purdue game. I think that when Ryan Day said it would either be this week, they were hopeful that it would be this week. But if not next week, I think you give him that extra rest there and allow him to recover, make sure he's full go, because he could be very important, as we'll talk about in a second. Phil Daniels is interesting because, and we'll get on to this more, Ian Moore, I thought played really well at right tackle. I don't know the prognosis of this injury. I did watch Philip Daniels warm up before the game, and while he wasn't doing everything, he was moving around, appeared to be okay. But again, you don't want to put too much on a guy that might cause them some longer term injuries. Tywone Malone's another interesting one. We didn't get an update on that. I think the reemergence of Edric Houston helps you feel more comfortable, plus Will Smith Jr. and some other guys on the interior helps you alongside Caden McDonald, who I should mention, helps you feel a little bit more comfortable about that. So I would not be surprised if you get when the availability report comes out on Saturday early evening. I think it'll be about 5:30. If there are a couple of those guys on there, maybe some game time decision, questionable guys, and there are a couple guys that sit out this game just to be sure. This does not sound like anything serious. Even a guy like Josh Padilla, who I said wouldn't surprise me if he misses this game, I think it's just getting him as close to 100% as you can get right now, as opposed to trying to push things. But that leads to some questions on the offensive line, and more questions have emerged throughout the season. The play I thought was really good up until about the Wisconsin game was when it started to get a little leaky. The pressures over the last 3 weeks, I think it's been 11 against Wisconsin, allowed against Wisconsin, 10 against Penn State, and then 11 again against Purdue last week. Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up here. According to PFF. So not what you would like. Maybe Penn State makes some sense because obviously they still have some talented defensive linemen that it can cause you trouble. Let's look here. Yeah, I've got the wrong week pulled up. Anyway, so I think there is some reason to have concern about that group. So pressures here against Purdue. They've now changed it to 9 pressures allowed. PFF goes back during the week and reevaluates the film and adjusts to that. Against Penn State, 11. And against Wisconsin, it was 11. Now you go back before then. I mean, even let's go to week 1 against Texas. They allowed 4 pressures. And that's a pretty good Texas defensive line. I'll just pull up, Washington, 6 pressures. So you've seen a little bit more in terms of pressure being caused on the quarterback thus far. And not what you want to see ideally from the offensive line as they head into the meat of the schedule, really. Now the talk has been about Tegra Shabola and that right guard position. And I think fair. And this is not an anti-Tegra Shabola sentiment. I think lots of people have talked about this. I'm not the only one seeing this. I know we've talked about it on Bucknuts. We talked about it earlier this week on the Instant Reaction Show. Tegra's had his struggles this year. There's no doubt about that. I think if you look at Ohio State's, again, going off of what PFF has, which, take it for what it is, but it gives us a barometer, especially in something like this, as to what guys did in games. Tegra has been one of the lowest graded offensive linemen. If you look at Hall positions of anyone who has played this year for Ohio State, he has the 18th best pass blocking grade between Bennett Christian and freshman Isaiah West. Run blocking, he is 19th between Simon Lawrence, a walk-on offensive lineman, and again, Isaiah West. So it has not been good. But I do think there has been somewhat of a overreaction to some degree. I think that the assessment of Tegra is often on the plays that he gives up, which is fair. You can't be giving up those plays. But there's also been drives, halves, things like that, where I thought Tegra's actually been pretty good. It's just really, for me, the inconsistency. Like, I would rather know, okay, he's going to go out and be really good, or, hey, this is a guy who's going to struggle. We need to do something. And I think that is the reason why there has been hesitancy to make a change, is because if you watch every snap, there are plays where Tegra does the things he's supposed to do. There are also plays like last weekend against Purdue where he allows, sorry, I had something on my camera there. He allows, just a blow by pressure, and Julian Sand has to get out of the pocket. Or there was a screen pass at one point where we're sitting in the press box watching it, and it's like, who is he blocking? He goes down, he doesn't block anyone, and the play doesn't go for very much, instead of potentially a big play, maybe even a touchdown on that play, because otherwise it was pretty well designed. And so it's just been the up and down nature of it. Now, one thing, and I talked about this on the Instant Reaction show with Dave Biddle earlier this week, like, to me, Tegra seems to be one of the guys who, I don't know if it's when he's pushed, when he feels his job's in jeopardy, when, he is able to rotate in and out of a game and sort of, I don't know if it's catch his breath or maybe sort of reassess things on the sideline with the iPad. Whatever it may be, it seems like when Tegra is being pressed by another guy and they're rotating said guy in there, his performance is better. And that this season, for the most part, has been Josh Padilla. Obviously, Josh Padilla was not out there for the game on Saturday. And instead, let's see here, it was Gabe Van Sickle, who I believe played 3 snaps at right guard, if I remember correctly. It's not loading here, but it wasn't a ton. They continued to rotate a little bit, but it wasn't a ton of snaps there. And Gabe had been playing on the left side of the offensive line previous to this. So I think that there is a clear, and Ryan Day has sort of admitted this, that there is some concern with the way Tegra played. Now, this is also the same guy who played well enough to help you win a national championship last year, right? And so that ability is in there. But if you are Ohio State, you've got to find the best 5, and you have 2 weeks to do it. And it's not all on Tegra. I think if you look back at let's go back to the Purdue game, for instance. The most pressures allowed, Carson Hinsman with 3. He also allowed a sack, as did Isaiah West, who's not an offensive lineman. Tegra was second. He allowed 2 pressures and 2 hurries. You go back to the week before against Penn State, Carson Hinsman, 4 pressures, 3 hurries. Tegra actually only allowed 1 in that game, again, according to PFF. Now, his pass blocking grade was very low, as was Carson Hinsman in that game. But you get my drift. Tegra is not the only one who's had issues. Philip Daniels against Wisconsin, he allowed 6 pressures. And I think that's another position on this offensive line that you could at least look at and say, does there need to be a change? Is there a rotation? Because last week, Ian Moore, he had, I believe it was no pressures. I'm just double checking this. Ian Moore, 0 pressures. According to PFF, his pass blocking grade was 83.5, which was second most to Austin Sareveld. Run blocking was 67.1, which of the starting offensive linemen was second best. You also saw Ethan Onyeonwa come in and play at that position, which we hadn't seen in a little while. This week, Ryan Day talked about those 3, going back to guard, Padilla, if he's healthy, Ethan Onyeonwa, and Tegra Shabola maybe rotating. Hard to say what that breakdown would look like. But I would not be surprised if you see some of that on Saturday against UCLA if all 3 of those guys are healthy. If Josh Padilla is not, I could see you seeing a little bit more of Ethan Onyeonwa playing some first-team snaps. And then you look on the tackle spot. I think Philip Daniels has played okay. This is his first full season starting, and last year he started 4 games at the position for Minnesota, so stakes are a little different. But the way that Ian Moore played, and Ryan Day talked about this, when you're playing tackle and your name's not getting brought up, you're usually doing pretty well. And watching back some plays, he did do well. I mean, there was some good pass blocking. Was it elite? Was it, this guy has to start right away? No, it wasn't. But I think there's really good signs there, if not for the rest of this season. If Philip Daniels comes back healthy and is able to play his best ball, maybe potentially next season, at one of those spots. So I think you've got, not only do you have some considerations there, but Austin Serveld, who for the first several weeks of the season hadn't allowed a pressure, and that was kind of a big talking point. Since then, he has allowed 8, at least 1 every game except the Purdue game, and 2. He had allowed 2 in 3 straight games. Now, that's not, left tackle. That's going to happen at times. It's why you want Julian Sand to be mobile and things like that. But I just point this out to say that no one has been great these last few weeks. And it is a little confusing because you'd want them playing their best ball right now. Even Josh Padilla, who I think when he's come in has played well. It's a small sample size. Let's see how many. I think it's like 60 some snaps that Padilla has played. He has played. Why is that not coming up? I don't know where it is, but it hasn't been. My point is, it hasn't been a ton of snaps for Josh Padilla, and I think when you look at 86 total offensive snaps. Now, some of that will include some of that is center early on. Yeah, he played 14 at right guard against Illinois, 26 at right guard against Wisconsin, and then 7 against Penn State. Graded out well according to PFF. Has not allowed a pressure, which is good to see, but it hasn't all been perfect. If you go back and watch each play, you'll see that, again, small sample size, but it's not enough that Josh Padilla has jumped over Tegra as much as people want to talk about it. And if he was playing at that elite level, I think you'd see him out there more. So it's something that I think the Buckeyes really need to get sorted, because you don't want to get into that Michigan game or against Indiana in the Big Ten championship game or whoever, or in the college football playoff, and have an offensive line that is a little leaky. That's what they call problematic. And so I think you have to get that fixed, because if Purdue's pressuring you 9 times, what's an elite team going to do with really good defensive ends? They need to get back to whatever was working early in the season. And obviously players, wear down and whatnot. Could they go to a rotation at right guard and right tackle? Certainly. We saw it last year. I am not a fan of that. I've talked about that. I talked about it even at the time, but it worked last year, right? And if you think it could work this year, maybe you do it. I'm not sure I love the idea of rotating both positions next to each other. And I'm not even sure how you would do that in terms of, do you say it's Tegra Shabola and Josh Padilla at right guard, and then Philip Daniels and Ian Moore right tackle? Do you do Tegra and Daniels, as you've seen most of the game, and then you rotate both out for Moore and Padilla? Or do you mix and match? I just think it creates a lot of questions, and I'd rather you find your best 5 if you're Ohio State and stick with those guys, frankly. Easier said than done. I understand that. That's why they rotated last year, though that was some of the guys being banged up, and maybe that's part of the problem here. But I don't want you to get to a college football playoff semifinal and not know who your best 5 or best 6 offensive linemen are. Rotating one spot like they have with Josh Padilla, fine, if that's what you think is best. I'm not sure I want to see it for multiple guys at that point in the season. I think the time to experiment with that was probably earlier in the year, and they did. They didn't seem to come to a conclusion. And now you can still do it this week, next week, UCLA and Rutgers. But I just don't know if you want to be doing it much beyond that, unless you just really think like last year, it's the best path forward. And then last year you were doing it with the guards on either side. They weren't next to each other. And so I think it made a little bit more sense, though I still not a huge fan of it in principle. Obviously, you liked what you saw last year. And then the defensive line, I think, especially specifically on the interior, which is where we had so many questions in the offseason, they've really developed some depth. And I think that that's been fun to watch. okay, you have a banged up Andrew Houston at the beginning of the season. He's not playing as well as he wanted to. You sort of sit him down for a little bit and let Tywone Malone become the starter there. And I think Tywone Malone's played really well. This is all next to Caden McDonald, who's played really well. You've got Will Smith Jr. rotating in there as well. So you've started to develop some really good depth, I think. And guys are playing it at a pretty high level, as at least, not claiming to be an expert on interior defensive line play, but you're seeing plays be made by these guys, run stops. Will Smith talked about last night about when we were talking to them about the tackle that he was tackled against Penn State and how he wanted to get to the quarterback. So yeah, I pulled up the snaps here. Caden McDonald's played 259. Tywone Malone's played 194. Edric Houston's played 168. Will Smith Jr. 155. And then you've got Jarquez Carter, Jason Moore, Eric Mensah, so on and so forth that have played all. Well, Jarquez Carter's played 51, but everyone else has played less than 50. So I think, 4-man sort of rotation there. I think if you'd told me that in the preseason, that the Buckeyes would find that and it would be a successful 4-man rotation, I think you take that every day. And so I think, while offensive line has maybe become, I don't want to say a question because they've still played well, but there have been more questions about the offensive line than there were early in the season. I think the defensive line, the interior of the defensive line has really become a strength and some depth and all sorts of things. So positives there. Okay, we're going to wrap this up with my quick thoughts on the UCLA game and what you'll be reading Sunday morning, because it is a night game. First of all, I'm interested on how Buckeye fans feel about this. You want more night games, but do you want a night game in mid-November? Doesn't impact me. Obviously, being in the press box, other than before the game and after the game, I don't think it's going to be too cold on Saturday night. But I'm curious, how do you feel about that? But look, this UCLA team, obviously, they had that stretch in October where they played well. They beat Penn State, all those things. The run after firing your coach, I think, has ended. 2 straight losses. Blowout to Indiana, and then against Nebraska with their freshman starting quarterback last week. So this should be a game. Ohio State's, I think, a 31.5-point favorite. This should be a game that the Buckeyes handle their opponent, roll, whatever you want to say. And I think that's what you're going to be reading. I think you'll be able to read about some more young guys that get rotated in, get an opportunity, because I think you should be able to handle this one perfectly fine. Without much hiccups. Now, Nico Iamaleava, obviously we saw him last year when he came to the shoe with Tennessee. A little bit different. He's running more this year than he did a year ago. So you have to be ready for that. And he's a talented player, no doubt. I just don't think they have the weapons to really cause the Buckeyes issues. We'll see. It's certainly, not ruling it out of the realm of possibility. But I think, if Ohio State handles their business the way they have, this should be, Sunday morning, you should be reading Buckeyes roll. You should be reading about the young players that got an opportunity. Hopefully you're reading about the run game getting going a little more, because I thought there were some positive things last week in that. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you to Garrick Hodge for coming on and joining me to talk some Buckeye recruiting and kind of what, deep dive into what to expect with this class. This class still not done yet. He thinks there could be some more additions. And then even some 2027 and some transfer portal talk. And then obviously talking about the trenches, so to speak, for the Buckeyes. So thank you, Buckeye fans. I will be on with Dave Biddle after the game on Saturday night. It's a late one, but I'm sure you'll be up and wanting to talk and hear about it. So we will see you then. Cheers.